Good afternoon. Let's wake everybody up. It is so good to be back and to be here today. Good to see everybody's face. I think we'll get started. It's 12:01. So, Mr. Coley, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Caballero.
Aye.
Commissioner Feinbaum.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Here.
Commissioner Pickett.
Here.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
I am here.
And Commissioner Gibson, not here yet.
Not here, won't be here.
Won't be here. Okay.
All right.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So I believe we've all had an opportunity to review September's minutes. May I have a motion to approve and second?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So first, we want to recognize Commissioner Caballero for the nominating committee report.
There it is. This year's nominating process for the term beginning January 1st of 2025 began in January of this year when the online application became available on KUB's website. The committee met in July and advertisements ran in the Knoxville News Sentinel and the Compass News website in August and were featured on the KUB website and social media. The committee evaluated and submitted applications and selected qualified applicants for interviews. The city charter requires that the board provide the mayor at least 5 nominees for each commissioner vacancy. The nomination committee recommends the following nominees: Daniel Carter, Louis Cosby, Adam Cohen, Phyllis Nichols, and Julie Wheeler. What do I have to say now?
Is that the end of your report?
That is the end of my report.
Thank
Everyone's
you.
looking at me and I'm like, there's nothing left on the paper to say.
Well, you've heard the recommendation of the nominating committee. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board regarding the nominations? Seeing none, thank you. Now I would like to ask Mark Walker, the board secretary, to distribute the ballots. The names of the nominees selected today will be submitted to the mayor, along with a complete set of all applications received this year. The mayor will select her nomination and submit the name to City Council. Thank you to the nominating committee for your work conducting the process this year.
I do need to.
I'm sorry.
Who all received the majority of the vote.
I apologize, because you
And,
were supposed to.
Chair Simpson Brown, just to make it official as far as the 5 candidates who received the majority of the votes are Daniel Carter, are Louis Cosby, Adam Cowan, and Phyllis Nichols and Julie Wheeler.
Thank you very much. Now we'd like to recognize Gabe for his president's report.
Yeah. Okay. My microphone's a little slow this morning too. Good morning, commissioners. As you know, last month we saw a devastating event with Hurricane Helene coming through this area. It really impacted the folks in Upper East Tennessee and Western North Carolina tremendously. It did have an impact on our system to some degree, and I wanted to give an opportunity to update you all on that. So I asked John Williams, Senior Vice President and Chief Infrastructure and Compliance Officer, to give you an update on the electric side of the business, and then John Gresham, Senior Vice President, Chief Engineering and Operations Officer, talk about how it impacted our water and wastewater systems. So, guys.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you. It's been a while since we've last seen each other, and as Gabe mentioned, Helene came to visit us and stayed longer than her welcome was, much like a lot of the communities around us, and we'll kind of talk through that. Fortunately, we were spared some of the catastrophic damage that our neighbors east of us, Western North Carolina, deep East Tennessee, experienced with the extreme flooding and the devastation up there. So we continue to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. Fortunately, our work is mostly finished here. But we'll talk about some of the stuff we did to assist them as well and may still to come. Headline here, y'all have seen this, obviously a lot of coverage about this, just real big things. First and foremost, we had time to prepare. So we'll talk a little bit about, as we walk through this, how we prepared and planned and at least use that as a positive as we went through this particular event. This particular hurricane path was unique in that it was extremely wide, 350 miles, and impacted 5 states. So that's definitely unusual. The path it took up through the mountains as well was certainly one that we don't see all the time. So just real quick headlines about where that was. But we did have multiple days to plan. So when we looked through this, we had a lot of time to plan. Unfortunately, because it was such a regional event, our ability to go and get additional help from other contractors wasn't there. Normally, an event like this, if we have time to prepare, we'll go and reach out through our contracts and resources to get more resources on site to help us. That wasn't available, so we had to do our best to plan. Fortunately, we do have a lot of contractor resources on the line crew side, vegetation side, as well as traffic control to begin to lay all that out. So we prepared, we planned, we staged some folks on that, and we really used this as an opportunity to learn. So within our incident command structure, we took this as an opportunity to begin to bring in additional resources to train with those experienced so that they can learn through this process, because we don't get these all that often of this size and complexity. And we're really happy with how that process went, and that's going to pay off in future events. We went through this piece. Just kind of walking through this a little bit, you're used to the map on the right. That's the Skittles outage map that kind of shows everything, red being bad and the black dots being the ones that we get to toward the end. So we kind of talk through those. I'll explain all that a little bit more, but you're used to seeing that. The graph to the left just kind of explain that. So rain started coming in around the 23rd. So between the 23rd and the 30th, we had about 5.5 inches of rain. Right around the 25th is where we got most of the rain. So about 2.5 inches on the 25th, just to kind of set the stage. So saturated ground, then you begin seeing winds come in. And so around the 26th, you see wind speeds picking up around 15, 20 miles an hour to 30-mile-an-hour gust. And then on the 27th, where you begin to see the spike in there, and I'll explain the colors in just a second, that's where you start to see 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts, trees falling down. So what the colors mean on the graph. So the red bars are the new outage events. So not the number of outages, but just the jobs that are coming in that are connected with whatever's causing the outage. So individual trees in this particular case are generally the case. The gray bars on top of that are the jobs that we've completed during that same period of time. And then the blue line that goes across is just the total number of outage events or jobs that went across the duration of the outage event. This one was unique. At most storms this time of year, you get high winds, you get things, they come through, cause devastation, cause issues, and then they go away. And we get to work, and it takes a certain number of days to do this. This lingered because of the continued winds that came through before, during, and after Helene stopped by our area. So that's kind of the overall trend there. And then as you can see, as it tailed in, there were still outage events that were coming in even on the backside of the event. So what I'm going to do is just walk through a little bit after this slide as to how we approach the storm kind of operational period at a time, just to give you an idea of how we worked the event, because it was a little bit different. But just by the numbers, 38,000 customer outages, about 1,100 jobs. So those bars and that blue line, that's about 1,100 across the event that we had through here. About a top 10, 15 storm overall. I'll show the comparison at the end with how it stacked up with some of the ones we've talked about before. And obviously trees being the story, and I'll show a chart or a pie chart here in just a little bit about where the outages came within that tree category. And then over 250 KB and contract resources on the ground, cleaning everything up, getting customers back restored. So that first event, as we went through the early morning hours on the 26th into the 27th, by 6 p.m. on the 27th, that first 12 hours, about 20,000 customers restored. So a lot of outages during that initial peak with the winds, but a lot of work done. A lot of that, as you'll recall, is those first operational period goals are getting the critical infrastructure back in place. So substations, breakers, getting those back in, making sure we have service to those critical resources, hospitals, other places that the community relies on, our plants, our pump stations, the things that are important. And then we also began that first wave of damage assessment. So we had staged people already out in the field, so we began looking at all the damage, trying to survey that and identify what jobs need to be worked, because we need to get that well ahead of the line crews, because you don't want your line crews waiting. And we began doing that and did a really good job with collecting over 100 line jobs waiting for those crews, so we were able to keep our line crews moving. And then obviously one of the things that was unique, because we didn't get the devastating flooding that the other communities did, but we get pockets of areas like this was in the southeast corner of our system. And so as those communities were being hit with this, obviously limits our ability to travel there, and obviously can't do a lot of restoration until those areas recede and get that water back out of the area. When you look into the next 24, 48 hours, again, those outages are continuing to come in from the winds continue to blow down trees, but we're beginning to catch up on it at that point in time. By 6 p.m. on the 28th, about 1,000 customers were out. We had plenty of line jobs to be done at that point in time, and so if you just do the math, we're down to the black dots there. So about 200 jobs, 1,000 customers, about 5 customers per job. So just for perspective, it takes about the same amount of time to do a line job, whether it's connected to 5 customers or 50 or others. It's poles, it's wires, it's equipment. So the time may be substantially the same, but you're just getting fewer and fewer customers on with the same amount of effort. So that's kind of where we're at this point in the event. Our assessment crews finished up during that time, so they're being released. And then as we move into that next 24 hours, crews are still working full speed ahead, but some of the back-end support, the ICS structure, a lot of that stuff beginning to demobilize and wind down as they have all their jobs, and it's just a matter of finishing strong. And then when we got to the 30th, as those smaller outages continue to come in, we're still working full steam ahead to keep everything going through the very, very end. I mentioned trees were the primary cause of outages, no surprise here. High winds, saturated ground, just a recipe for trees to fall. When you look at the overall chart, about half of those were from outside the zone that we maintain. So as you all know, we talk about vegetation management, whether it's on our 69 kV or transmission circuits or distribution circuits. We maintain a certain area around those that's normal to keep those areas safe. So about half of those with trees fell from outside of that zone into our lines. The other half were areas inside of that. One thing I do want to point out, it's been a few months ago, but we talked about overhanging limbs. We had talked about this with our community advisory panel, brought to you all some recommendations to begin managing that above our lines differently than in years past, and working through that strategically. We began doing that incrementally, but obviously hadn't had time to affect that yet. But just to give you an idea, this particular storm, and all storms are a little different, but this is about 100 to 120 jobs, about 4,500 customers that potentially could have been impacted differently had those overhanging limbs not come down on the line. So we do think this is an opportunity for improvement as we move forward in time, something that we're working on there. Obviously, the heroes in this event are the employees that took time away from their families, worked around the clock to get everybody back in service, but we also have to get a lot of credit to our contractors as well, our line contractors, tree contractors, and our traffic control contractors. It takes all of that to make that work. And then obviously with this particular event, as I mentioned, a lot of folks from around the organization, not just the line crews and others, but engineering and meters and our operational groups all came together for damage assessment and a variety of other things to make this work. It takes the entire team to make these happen as well. So I want to say thank you to them for sure. Comparison, just some numbers just to kind of get an idea. Again, top 10, 15 event overall over time, and you can just kind of see where we're at in terms of some of those measurable things that happened during those particular events. Costs are still coming in on this one yet, don't have the numbers. I think for sure it'll approach close to $1 million, if not more, but those numbers are still coming in as we continue to tabulate everything. Mutual aid, that's obviously a point of interest because I mentioned some of our neighbors to the east definitely were impacted much greater than we were. So we began getting some requests. So certainly we released some crews, some of our contract crews for those areas, Mountain City, Bright Ridge as well. We also, if you recall, Hurricane Milton came right behind that in Florida, released some crews to support that as well. There were a few other communities that requested some support on the electric side, even some KUB crews, but later canceled. Some of those communities had so much devastation, it's just taken them a minute to figure out what they need and how to manage that and what first things first. So we anticipate that we may get a few more requests, and if we do so, we'll do everything we can to try to help those communities as well. And then last thing, our customers were certainly very understanding, appreciative of our employees and all the hard work that they put into this. A lot of kind messages, words on social, other ways in which they complimented our folks. Real happy about that, and certainly we are as well. So before I hand it over to Mr. Gresham to talk about the water system, any questions? Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Commissioners, let's pivot to a space we don't talk about a whole lot when it comes to emergency response. So this event was a little different for us as well. I'm sort of tipping my hand in this picture because we're going to talk about the Tennessee River a whole lot this afternoon. You can see that here. This is the Holston River coming in a little clear. You can see here maybe. This is the French Broad creating the Tennessee, and that's a very dirty river. A lot of mud in that water there, and we're going to talk about that. So, as John said, his forecast map that he had on his first slide showed this storm literally going over Knoxville. We actually got a little bit fortunate on our side of the mountains. That satellite picture shows where the thing really went. So it's hard to see here, but that's the state line of Tennessee. This is the hurricane sitting over the Carolinas, dumping an immense amount of moisture. So from our perspective today, the events John talked about are relatively routine for us. We have wind, we have rain, we have trees fall, and we respond to those. This thing's going to break up into two things. The local weather impact wasn't that significant. As John said, we had about 5.5 inches of rain that was spread over 6 days. We like it that way. We're able to manage that water and deal with things. Our peak day was 2.3 inches there on the 25th. The difference maker here was what happened outside of our service territory. And you all have seen it on the news. Asheville, 15 inches of rain. Busick, North Carolina, which is about 20 miles northeast of Asheville, almost 31 inches of rain. That's almost unbelievable. So looking at the Tennessee River, this graphic shows the Tennessee River watershed. There's Knoxville. Here's where all that rain happened. The Tennessee River is fed by the Holston, which includes Cherokee Lake, and the French Broad, which includes Douglas Lake. Now, we're very fortunate that we have a great partner in the Tennessee Valley Authority. They manage the waterway. Their original justification for being was to prevent flooding in the Tennessee Valley, and here's where that's paying off. So they managed both of those rivers with their dams, the Cherokee Dam and the Douglas Dam, which really helped us protect us downstream from what occurred. So to give you some idea of perspective, you see the typical flows for each dam. That's in cubic feet per second. There's about 7.8 gallons of water in a cubic foot. So that's a lot of water on a regular day. What happened during this event was almost unbelievable with Douglas Dam, which is the source we're most worried about here today. 62,000 cubic feet per second coming through that dam. So a lot of water we saw heading to our doorstep, right? So we had three major concerns that we were worried about as we saw this unfold. Flooding risk from the rising elevation of the river, muddy water, which we're going to call turbidity, and then large debris coming down the river that could damage our intake and other facilities. So we're going to talk about those. So from a flood risk perspective, the river is typically 812 to 814 feet above sea level, and that's where it floats most of the time. When the events happened in North Carolina, 12 hours later, that water was beginning to move towards us. the river elevation increased rapidly. So you can see on this chart, the red chart, so this is time, this is river elevation. That's last year, 2023. Pretty stable river. Here, September 26th, the river started peaking, and it literally stayed elevated for over 11 days, which is a big deal for us. So from our perspective, at our intake, our water intake on the river, which most of you all have seen, the river crested at about 819.7 feet. We begin to get worried about flooding potential at about 825 feet. So that sounds like not that much, but when you think about the broad river and what it takes, it took this catastrophic event to raise it 5 or 6 feet. It would have to happen again to raise it the rest of the way, right? And so we felt pretty good about that. We actually have a flood mitigation program at MBW. So if you remember back a number of years ago when the Cumberland River flooded in Nashville and flooded downtown Nashville, we watched that event from afar and we decided we need to prepare for that. So we did a flood study with MBW and we came away with our flood mitigation plan, which is basically a set of what we call door dams. We're able to put doors in brackets across the plant and protect water from getting into our critical facilities. And that system gives us 3 to 4 foot more of elevation. So those doors were not deployed. We had them ready, we had them set up. We have an alarm that goes off when the Williams Creek there on the plant gets to a certain level. But we were fortunate that this really didn't happen. We were worried about flooding, and flooding really didn't happen at the plant, if that makes sense. But because we were worried about the flooding, the Tennessee Valley Authority has a river forecast center. It's right downtown here, just not far from us. We're familiar with them, so we began coordinating with them on a daily basis, getting information from TVA about their plans to manage the water. So we were hearing about the predicted level of the river, the elevation, the status of the dams, in particular Douglas Dam, and I included this on the slide because I just find it fascinating that TVA released 323 billion gallons of water through that dam and down through the Tennessee River, so just a lot of water. And then we got the forecast from the 2 rivers we're dealing with. So if you'll look as we talk, this is Douglas. Douglas is letting water out. You can see the coloring of the water, right? It's muddy. It's problematic for us to treat when there's that much sediment in the source water. And as I said, Douglas Dam peaked at 62,000 cubic feet per second. So that means water is moving really fast. And at that velocity, sediment won't settle. It's stirred up, it's churned up, and just keeps the river dirty. If you've seen the river today, it still looks somewhat like that. It's not recovered yet. So to give you a sense of perspective, that volume of water is filling up Neyland Stadium in less than 10 seconds. And we did that for 11 days. So it's a lot of water coming at us. And another interesting point, the TVA reported that the level of Douglas Dam Lake rose 22 feet. So again, just large volumes of water. So the second issue we're worried about, we talked about it already, turbidity, and I'm so glad John mentioned the Skittle map, because on the right is Willy Wonka's Fudge River from the movie, right? So I thought this was impactful because the picture on the left is just the normal Tennessee River, the color we've seen, roughly the same location during this event. Significant sedimentation in the river there, and that's for hundreds of miles probably. So the scope of it's really hard to understand, but that'll give you that. And we'll talk about turbidity here. So the Tennessee River is our source of raw water to produce our drinking water. Turbidity does measure the sediment in the water. We have online instrumentation at the plants that measures this many times a day. And it basically shoots a beam of light through there and measures what comes out the other end, and we know what's in the water. So it really measures the clearness, right? So normal levels for the Tennessee River are 14 to 15 units of turbidity at any given day. During a typical rain event, like John mentioned, rain came in several days before the hurricane. We dealt with that, and it was starting to move sedimentation into the river of its own right. But we're accustomed to seeing that. We get nervous at 100, a value of 100. This event, which we had to take with manual means because it overwhelmed, which we'll talk about in a second, 276 is what it ultimately went up to. So really murky water. And the chart's neat because you see September 22nd, we're hammering right along like we always do. We're very happy. The rain event came several days in advance and started bumping the sedimentation around. And then the results of the hurricane came and pegged our meter that we have down by the river on about October the 6th, I believe that was. And then we've systematically, the river's trying to recover. Now, oddly enough, last week, we had 2 days where turbidity went above 100 again. And we're estimating that's the river just trying to work through the sediment. So we probably are gonna see this for a little bit longer. Now, what's really neat, and I'm gonna give away my final point here for my presentation, but I know these numbers are probably difficult to see, but you see 3 categories. Raw turbidity, so that's the measure in the river. Settled turbidity, and that's what comes out of our sedimentation basins. So if you all remember visiting MBW, as you entered the gate, those were the basins on the right over there that had the working beams going up and down, where we really try to slow the water down and drop things out of it. And then you see our final water here. So you see the 200, we averaged over 100 for this entire period of time. Settled turbidity, look at the progress we've made. We've dropped it down to 2.64 as a maximum, and we've got it down closer to 1 on average. And then our final water, 0.02 across the board. That's where we want to be. So our regulatory requirement is to be less than 0.3. So our operators and our processes did exactly what we wanted them to say. So you know what that means? That means crystal clear water like you've got in your glass this morning. So the process has worked as designed. The third issue we were worried about, and these pictures are just, I can't even comprehend what this looks like, but these are courtesy of TVA, and those are pictures from Douglas Lake. And that's debris as far as you can see. And that's all debris that would have come down the river towards us. Fortunately, TVA is a great partner, saw this, anticipated it, and deployed a 4,000 foot, almost a mile, boom to protect this stuff here from getting into the dam and possibly damaging the dam, and then getting over the dam and possibly damaging things like our water intake building. So I found these fascinating. I don't know if they're worth anything to you today, but I have no idea how TVA is going to clean this up. That looks like an insurmountable job to me. But so we were worried about that stuff getting to us. Not so impressive, but our point, and I apologize for the quality of this picture, but it's one of our security cameras down on the river. But we installed a number of years ago a protective permanent boom around our water intake. It keeps boats away from our structure, and it keeps debris away from our structure. So during this event, we started capturing debris, and this thing runs, all the way around. So we started capturing large trees and limbs and wood, trash. This is a rolled up bale of hay that you're used to seeing out in the fields. I don't know what that weighs soaking wet, but it's got to be a lot. And then interestingly enough, this cylinder here, that's a 1,000 gallon liquid propane container that someone was probably using at their home or their business for heating. And yes, it's full of propane at this moment in time. So the boom really protected us. I'm glad we had this investment. We engage a contracted barge company that comes every month and cleans this out for us. They had to wait a few days for the river conditions to settle down, but they ultimately responded to this. They knocked this valve off of this tank and they let it vent the atmosphere for about 24 hours. And then they were able to come and pick all this up and haul it off for us. Our boom's spotless right now. They've done a great job keeping that clear from us. But any of this getting into our intake could have caused significant problems for us. So getting to our treatment processes proper, this is a great picture taken by our communication groups with one of KUB's new drones to set the stage for you. This is the Holston River coming under the railroad bridge there. Off camera to the right is the French Broad. You see the water and the dynamics of the mixing here. And it's really interesting to see how that happened, but it ultimately turned into the Willy Wonka version down by the stadium. So from a water treatment perspective, like I said, the 3 concerns we had there, Our operators, 24/7, 365, they saw this coming. We were really worried about the localized weather, where our attention is typically fascinated with, but we quickly recognized that stuff was coming at us we've really never seen before. So they did a great job of adjusting our treatment processes to deal with this turbidity. They did a great job process monitoring across the plant. They coordinated with TVA. They monitored that protected boom to make sure it didn't get overwhelmed. And ultimately, the story here for us and the story of success is our chemical feeds. And so we've all gone through this period of worrying about the supply chain, right? COVID showed us the supply chain can be disrupted. We quickly got concerned watching the interstate being washed out going through the mountains, manufacturers over in North Carolina being impacted and washed away. We got a little nervous about our chemical supplies. So fortunately, our chemical supplier is to our west. So we made contact with them. They were stable. They had done their job and protected their supply stream, and they rapidly began arranging with us to deliver volumes of chemicals we weren't used to seeing. So the chemical we use to settle this out is called a coagulant, and we put it in at those settling basins. It attaches itself to the particles and drags it to the bottom to allow clear water to go down to our filters and protect our filters. So we typically take 1 truck a week-ish probably of coagulant. We were using 4 and 5 times that volume to get all this mud out. So we were taking a truckload a day to manage this issue. But our folks did a great job in doing that. And bottom line, we were very successful in continuing to serve our community with high-quality, regulatory compliant drinking water, which, you know, neighbors to our east, they had more significant damage and weren't able to do that. So from a water perspective, it worked out well for us. From a wastewater treatment perspective, again, it was back to more localized. And getting that rain over several days was just a rainy period for us. So we did move into high flow procedures at all of our plants for 3 days there, basically across the weekend. Again, we were very successful and were able to put clean water back in the river and do what we're supposed to do. Actually, you see one of our operators here working, just wanted to put a plug in. That's the Kauai biologically enhanced high rate clarifier we've talked about a bunch over the past few years. It was put into service and utilized during this event, and our operators taking some samples there to make sure everything's going the way they were supposed to go. We did have one unusual hiccup in this process at Kauai, and the elevated river level and some of that debris that made it past the boom, maybe early in the phase. On September the 30th, we noticed muddy water beginning to come in to Kauai at its influent. That was unusual. It took us about a day to figure out where that was coming from, but we have just upstream from the plant, we have an emergency overflow pipe that we can use if the plant was to ever get inundated with water. Well, apparently the river level had forced some debris into that valve and forced it open, and water was getting into the plant. So minor inconvenience, we were able to treat around it. What'll happen once the river really settles out, we're gonna have to send a diver in up there to clean that valve up, get the debris out, and get that valve reset once things clear up for us. Other than that, we had no real issues with our water treatment. And much like John said, really just want to recognize the dedication and readiness of our plant operators, our maintenance folks, and all the support people that go around this. They worked long hours. They were really focused for almost a month now. It's hard to believe it's been a month, but they've been working at this almost a month, making sure we're providing service to the community. And these are pretty essential services here, especially the drinking water. If you've read about Asheville at all, you understand how quickly that can go south on you. So in closing, I didn't really have a slide about mutual aid here. It's interesting on the electrical side. We seem to do it more. We're much more practiced, much more mature as an industry of supporting each other. On the water side, it was a little chaotic. Obviously, the catastrophic nature of the damage in North Carolina made it chaotic. But we did provide some laboratory instrumentation to Greenville. They had some plant damage there and lost some equipment. So we loaned them some lab tools to allow them to measure like we were measuring. And then we had a couple of operators who had volunteered to serve at other utilities. They got on a list. They never got called, but they stand by ready and willing to do that. We had a request for some heavy equipment that kind of came across and never panned out, but again, we were ready and willing to provide that. And then interesting enough, the U.S. Army called us a couple of days in. They had deployed to Greenville and had troops there in response to some of the events, and they were looking for drinking water to provide to the troops as they work. So they called us and said, hey, would KUB be willing and able to fill up some tankers for us to provide water? And we said, of course we would. We'd be happy to do that. And ultimately, they were just in the planning phases and obviously found a more convenient source, so it didn't happen, but we would have been happy to do that. So mutual aid there is still probably working it out, and there's probably still opportunity for us to pitch in and help as things work out. But I thought our folks did a great job, and just want to reassure the board that, you know, we were able to do what we were supposed to do, and some of the investments you all have endorsed and encouraged really paid off here. I would have loved to had our new filters in place. We're a few months away from that, and I would have loved to had what's up next after the filters is an additional sedimentation basin. It would have been really advantageous to have a fourth to help us get through this. But those investments will really help us carry on when things get tough. So that's all I had. Any questions? You're welcome.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say, I worked, it didn't work. I called Gabe during all of this. Our Greenville division was, for probation, was impacted. And we cover that whole upper area in service to the community up there. And so when I heard that the water station just went, I mean, it was washed away, as you know. I'm just giving kudos and some appreciation to all the work and the information you provide to us, because it enabled me to make decisions about my staff and how, and advising even my counterpart in the clerk's office about the timing and the judges about when they should open the courthouse. So that was, it's very, it's like not that we take it for granted, but we get so much information, but it does happen. We understand it, I understand it, and I was able to make decisions, real-time decisions for my folks, for their safety, for the safety of the community we serve, based on the information and the knowledge I have from serving on this board. So that's just my tooting the horn of all of you to do an excellent job in providing us with the information we need to serve the community. So excellent job.
Thank you, John. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Question. You may not know the answer to this, but I'm curious if all this turbidity and debris will have any effect on the ecosystem of the water, the plants, the fish, or anything? Or is it this just a kind of it is what it is and it'll work its way out?
Yeah, won't pretend to be an expert there, but I would say it would almost have to have some temporary. Of course, it's a natural course of things. That's how, mud makes it to the, Gulf region, basically, the Mississippi Basin there. But I would imagine it would. I know TDEC, the Department of Environment and Conservation, I know they had monitors out, because one of the risks I didn't mention was other things in the water like fuel or chemicals or asphalt and things. That really didn't raise itself up, mainly because the volume of water was diluting everything. But I know they had sensors out for that, but I don't know about wildlife, but I'm sure it's a shock to the system, but I'm also sure it probably recovers fairly quickly, since it's kind of an organic process to begin with.
And then when you loan equipment, I know we do this of many events and it goes both ways. Is this just a kind of in-kind relationship between utility
Yeah,
companies?
we'll expect to get those instruments back. They'll come back.
Right, yeah,
to
but
us
we
at
don't
some-
charge,
No.
blah, blah, blah.
No,
So
we
it's
just
just
make sure
in-kind,
they've
which,
got it,
as it
and-
should be, so.
Glad we got the contact to reach out to us to ask for it, honestly, and glad
Yeah.
we could help them. But yeah, just kind of an in-kind.
Well, thank you, and
Deal.
thank everyone, because it was quite an event, and still a long way to go for many, but
We'll learn a lot from this.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we'll get better from it.
Thank you, Board. Thank you, John and John. I appreciate that. Next up, I have asked Jamie Davis to give you an update on fiber. It's going very, very well. People love it. Retention rate's phenomenal. We just can't go fast enough for some folks. But I want to give you an update and have him give you an update on that. He's our Senior Vice President of Fiber and Chief Technology Officer. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Gabe. Commissioners, excited to review with you our first quarter performance for this fiscal year. Last time we were together talking about fiber, we were laying out our plans for this fiscal year and some of the challenges. And so really that'll be the structure of our discussion today. And I would encourage any questions that you all have to be sure that we're touching all the points that you would be interested in. And in full disclosure, I have no candy references in this presentation. So let me be sure this is working. All right. So let's just jump right in on construction. So part of our goal this year was obviously to continue to extend our system. We were going to literally double the amount of fiber we have on system, and this year's build alone represents about 25% of the effort that we were going to be laying out. So this fiscal year, 3 months in, we've laid down about 342 miles of fiber, progressing towards our goal of 1,400 miles. That's all well and good, but our real goal there is obviously to make it available to customers. You can see that our goal for this year is to literally almost double up again as it relates to how we want to make available another 65,000 opportunities for folks to become customers, and we've opened it up to just over 6,000 customers. On the map, it's a little difficult with some of the print, but to let you know about the colors, so green is where we're available as we ended the fiscal year. As we've discussed, the yellowish gold color is what we've released this fiscal year, so up in the Crippen Road area of Halls. And then just as of today, actually late breaking news, we've opened up the Sequoia Hills area for pre-sale. So installations beginning in that space here in a couple weeks. So we're excited about that, and already had a bunch of orders coming through this morning, so that makes me happy. If you take a look then in the navy colors, kind of around the ring, and then here in this space here, that's what we will continue to release in this fiscal year. So by June 30 of 2025, those areas will be open, with first up on deck will be our Kodak Russell area in November of 24, and then up here in the upper deep northeast, Maynardville Luttrell areas there, kind of finishing out our Union County installation there. So part of our objective being to serve, again, those areas that are unserved. First quarter of the calendar year of 25, we really make a big dent in that, getting into those outer reaches of our service territory. You have a question?
So you're saying you're going to make a big dent getting into those others. Is getting into those other areas, you feel like, going to allow you to reach that goal of 65,000 additional customers?
Yes.
'Cause
So
they have
if you
greater
can kind of see
density?
yes, absolutely. If you can see the mix of what else is left in blue, if you kind of say, let's just assume that more dense, less dense, then you kind of strike that balance. And so you cover a lot of ground in these outer areas where the density isn't quite there, but then through here, you really start opening up some really dense populations. But great question. But as that year kind of cascades, we'll go all the way to next June, really opening up areas, really starting at the beginning of the year, almost like every month. So you'll start seeing some big progress there. So good construction progress, onboarded some new contractors that won the bids this year. That's gone very well, very, very pleased with their performance. We're on target and on budget, which is obviously a big deal in this economy, along with as much work as we were doing. One area of note, and we'll talk about it a little with our growth in a second, is to the extent that we're ahead of schedule on our growth curve. It's kind of like new service. That's a good thing. If you have to go over budget extending services, to the extent we beat our bets there, then we may be just a little over budget on electric capital in that regard, but that'd be a good thing. So one of the big challenges in extending, we've talked to this board about, is our space in the MDU. Again, MDUs are multiple dwelling units, apartments, strip malls, condos, that kind of thing. Anywhere there's a kind of shared under one roof. Big area of focus as we talked to this board about our strategic initiatives this year was to kind of break through in that space. Pleased to respond that we are making good progress. We brought on additional resources in the design space with 2 additional firms. We've dedicated specific crews to a deal with construction with the MDUs, and that is reaping rewards. We've added additional sales staff that have helped out in this space. That was part of our plan this year, to bring on additional sales folks. And then hopefully here in the very near future, a coordinator that we identified. We didn't have this role when we put together the business plan, but seeing someone needing to be there to be the quarterback with that coordination that still remains pretty tough between owner and property owner, homeowner. If you remember us talking about getting into individual units, getting on property, we're going to put somebody in a role that literally can kind of hold the one hand of our construction and design staff, and on the other hand would hold what I would call the development community of the property owner to kind of be that go-between, that quarterback, if you will. If you look on the chart there, just really trying to show you graphically that we are making progress. The dark blue lines, the navy lines, were from last fiscal year. You can see every quarter the number of MDU addresses that we released continue to climb, and then first quarter of this year beat first quarter last year, so we're pleased about that. Depending on the size of the development and the timing of that, can be where like fourth quarter was bigger than first quarter, so it's not necessarily linear, but just really showing quantitatively that indeed we are making progress in that space. It is still challenging. There is no two questions about that. Getting in, coordinating with all these folks, a lot of it can be overcome though through coordination and communication. As this is a big mainline year build, we will balance both resource allocation and our goals in getting to customers as whether we kick in, to quote football, pour on more steam in this space, or whether we kind of just meet our goals in this progress. So pleased, but the challenge is still existing in MDUs. Questions on that? Okay, so speaking of growth, very pleased. For the first time coming to this board, we recast our sales curve last spring as part of the IRP, and very pleased to say that we have exceeded our goal in customer growth for the first quarter. So that plan called for the addition of about 2,300 customers, residential customers, and we've added just over 2,700. Now this is at the end of September. I have some current numbers here that kind of demonstrate where we are sit here in late October. The good news is that while part of this is from opening new areas, and we always get a new buzz when we open up a new area, the growth is literally from all over our service territory. So even back into some of those very early areas that we opened up in our Mohawk and Arlington areas, we've seen good growth all over the system. As we do exit polls, if you will, or 30-day past installs, our customer satisfaction remains very, very high. We're very pleased about that. A lot of buzz out and about on social media if you see that. But also, one thing that we were told to watch was churn. And indeed, very pleased that we're retaining over 99% of our customers. We have less than about 1% churn every month. And a lot of those are either due to non-pay and then they come back to us, and or they're moving. We have a really transient population in Knoxville. I think both utilities and with cable fiber internet. And we're seeing that trend as well too, is that folks move around quite a bit and move off system. But again, losing only about I think 0.7% to churn, and very little due to the competition. So that makes us happy as well. Question on that? Looking at it kind of graphically, you've seen these two charts before, was we split both residential and business customers. It's more so the shape of that graph that really kind of explains how we've been on a little bit of a rocket ship. As we sit here in April going over our plans for this fiscal year, we had about 9,000 residential customers. So if my aim is good enough, if I go up here to April, I'm just north of that 9,000, and you kind of see where we've been in just a few short months. So exponential growth in that space. And that's also over on the business side as well too. At April, we had about 400 business customers, and we sit today just well over 600. Of note there, and I definitely don't think anybody's eyes, maybe a couple of folks, maybe the commissioners can see that green bar, that little thin green bar that shows up, I guess that's right about in July or August, is a new product that we were responsive to the business community. Some needed some bigger than a gig, but they didn't want our Custom Connect product. And so we added a 2.5 gig at work, and we have now over 7 of those customers, and we're growing. And we've also added a more enhanced phone product. What we've realized, and for those of you in business that are responsible for getting your internet, you're going to get your internet where you get your business phone. And so what we realized is they have enhanced internet needs. They're also enhanced phone needs. And so we're offering an enhanced phone product that's well bigger than what we thought, more complicated, if you will, than what we thought when we launched this business. I say both of those to say we've been responsive to the business community. We knew that going into this, we'd have to be nimble. We'd have to deliver and develop products in order to be competitive. And the staff that works in this space has done a great job doing that and listening to that. And that's really through feedback through our sales folks, and then turning around and working with our IT and finance folks really to kind of develop those new products and be responsive in the market. So if we look at a forecast for what we anticipate for the rest of the fiscal year, again, that growth in the residential, you'll see the blue line being our baseline forecast, with the red being where we sit today, solid line being actual, and the red line, or the red dotted line, being forecast. As we sit here today, with the line there, we have 13,868 residential customers. So good news is that is well above that blue line even before October. So we are ahead of forecast by a decent amount. Now you say, well, why in the world is that dotted line coming back to the blue line? Well, because I'm betting for a slow season. I don't want to project to be over just yet. There's certain football coaches that would call, thinking that you're getting too far ahead, and it was that rat poison, I think is what Nick Saban used to say. So I'm believing the rat poison yet that we're going to end up over forecast. But indeed, if we hold serve here and keep growing at the rate we're going, we could exceed well over 20,000 residential customers, which would be a great thing as we continue to grow our system and release these areas. So very, very pleased with that outlook of the fiber system. So why do we think that growth has been strong? I like to believe that it's a multitude of things, and believe me, if I could pinpoint exactly what it is, we'd replicate it everywhere. But we've been very consistent and deliberate in our efforts in marketing. And if you recall back to the strategic initiatives, one of the things that we were going to focus on was really not only keeping awareness high in our product set with our customers, but also really focusing on conversion. That's really where the rubber meets the road, is to get that customer to be able to commit and become a customer of KUB Fiber. Everywhere we turn, to Gabe's point, we hear, when are you going to hurry up and get to me? When is my area opening up? So we know we have good awareness, good consideration for our product, and that word of mouth is invaluable. When you look at social media, when you look at the different platforms of Facebook and Reddit and Nextdoor, Twitter, you name it, a lot of folks, even our customers, are carrying the banner for us, and we're so thankful for that. And so that was one of the things we did to carry that fast, friendly, and local message, was to use their voice. And so if you've seen our social, if you've seen our advertisements on TV, we've elected to really get real customers, real KUB Fiber customers, to tell that story. We sent out an email a few months back and said, would you be interested in being on camera and telling the story? We were overwhelmed with the response. And so we've had a lot of folks. We filmed in Market Square and on South Waterfront, places that are familiar to Knoxville. And I hope you've seen those advertisements, and I hope you're enjoying them, and we know that's making a big impression. We are using an opportunity, and again, being nimble in this space, being local, affords us an opportunity to not have to consider things at a national level, is we've been really targeted, focusing on efforts that we control, and meaning that timeliness of response. When a storm like Helene comes through, we run to the storm just like our brothers and sisters in our other utility operation, and maybe people appreciate that we're able to do that, and that's our approach. We've also highlighted maybe some other challenges of other providers, like losing contracts with certain television stations, like, say, losing ESPN in the middle of football season, or losing the Braves during their playoff run. So we've said, hey, we've got those folks. So if any of you all have received emails as prospective customers, we've highlighted some of those issues as well too, kind of drawing a service distinction as well. But one of the things we're probably the most proud of is really meeting folks boots on the ground. It really has made a difference. We've done it the KUB way. It's not been a hard sale. We talked to this board before about our popcorn deliveries, and just providing them folks at their doorstep a nice acknowledgement that, hey, we're in your neighborhood. We want to be your provider of choice, and here's a nice little treat. It's not candy, but it is a treat. But we've also been getting into neighborhoods, HOAs, doing meetings like that, doing on-time real delivery, or on-time real-time installations, and those, we've had a recent HOA event in which we had 11 installations at the event and 10 more signed up at it. And the real difference there has been our events coordinator has done a great job lining up those, other KUB employees getting involved, helping support those events. So if you look at the numbers there on the screen, with 28 on-site events at MDUs and 34 popcorn delivery days visiting 52 neighborhoods, if you kind of add up the number of working days in this quarter, we've been pretty busy out on the street. And I really think that's another reason why we've moved the needle in growth. And not only, I'm sorry? So we have a nice door packet, you know, like some other providers will kind of knock with an iPad and try to sign you up that day, maybe a little bit today only kind of hard pressure sale. What we do is we just show up in your neighborhood when we're getting ready to open up service. We hang a door knocker with a bag that has a bag of nice little popcorn in it, and along with what's that? And it would say, you have a movie night on us, and it would have a QR code where you can go register for service. So I think probably some of the commissioners who had neighborhood are available in their neighborhood may have seen one. I hope so. Hopefully it's been on your door. So, but it's been a real nice kind of and we can't even claim originality with that. We stole that from our friends down at EPB in Chattanooga. They gave us that idea. But a lot of folks have said, hey, that's a pretty neat idea, and they've enjoyed the good popcorn as well too. So hopefully if you haven't gotten some, you will soon as we come into your neighborhood. But also targeted efforts around our Connected program. I know this board was very passionate about that program. It's kind of getting off the ground now, working with our partner agencies and a lot of folks in Tiffany's staff doing community relations, but we're really pleased to say we're serving over 100 families with no cost internet in their homes. And we know that program will only go upward from here, and we're really excited about that as well too. So any questions about our outreach events? All right. So finally, Helene wasn't just for water, wastewater, electric, and gas. Fiber system was impacted as well. So in general terms, and this is really the first time we'll talk about storm response as it relates to the fiber system, but we trail electric, right? When there's infrastructure damage done in that place, it's obviously more important and more safely addressed by our electric friends. And so a lot of times we will then trail behind them. At the peak of the event, we had over 1,100 fiber customers out from just sheerly power being out, if that makes sense. Only 66 of our customers were out due to a fiber-related issue. That's big for fiber, you know, with sitting around, let's just call it 14,000 customers. And a lot of times you'll see more of this situation here where this was impacted, but we've all seen trees or other infrastructure where a pole's not broke on a communication line. And once that's removed and the power restored, everything's fine. That's obviously the plurality of what happened to us. But we did have 66 customers who were impacted by either broke fiber or something of that nature. And that average outage is about 17 hours. So if you think about that, I'm out, electric does their work, we come in and do our response. Splicing is the equivalent of replacing a pole in the electric world. It takes us a while to splice. And so this is one of our splice crews responding out in the field, taking care of our customers in that space. We had 7 line crews and 6 splicers that then worked over the course of 2 days to restore our customers, or restore fiber to our customers. That's literally putting those little bitty pieces of glass or that fiber together. So inside of that jacket are sometimes dozens of hair-like fibers. So when you go to splice that line together, when you bring 2 endpoints together, it is a meticulous process and takes a long time. Absolutely. Great question. We can show you a demonstration of that. My eyes are nowhere near good enough to do the job they do. All right. Ironically, we felt regional impacts as well too in this space. And you say, well, how was that the case? Well, I really like the images that John and John put up about the path of that storm, and think of where it went coming up through the Gulf. We have 3 internet feeds, if you will, coming into Knoxville. The internet proper. We receive internet from Atlanta and from Ashburn, Virginia. Now think about the path of that storm and where it went. So the image on the slide there of that building is, if you all remember, if you've been on your tour with us, our hut. That is a communication office for one of our internet providers in Hartford, Tennessee, which is one of the exits right before you start going up to Asheville. It's like that last place you can either go rafting or get gas, if you will, right there at Harmon Den and all that. That obviously was destroyed. The water come through and the storm came through, and there was 15,000 feet missing fiber of cable. Now, do the math. That's miles that was missing. They said they could not even locate it. It was taken off the poles and gone. So we lose that feed coming from Knoxville down. So where they needed to replace that line, they literally didn't have a reel with that much fiber on it, but in Nashville. And when we heard word of that, we said, because we're in deployment and we've got a lot of fiber sitting on the yard, we can bail you out. So very similar to loaning lab equipment or whatever else, we were able to provide that reel. That saved travel time to and from. I am firmly amazed that they got that particular line back up within 24 hours. At the same time, the line from here to here was impacted right around Atlanta due to flooding. So we were down to one feed, if you will, connecting to the internet proper. That's a big deal to us as far as redundancy goes. So we too will learn from this and understand geographic diversity and where we should go. But historically, going two different directions, you wouldn't think you would be impacted. But that just really talks about the size and the scale of this particular storm. Very happy with our strategy, even as a young internet provider, that redundancy, ultimately, if you were a KUB fiber customer, you felt no impact in that space.
Jamie, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Really, you don't have to go back, but the backslide, you talked about the 60 people who were impacted for about 17 hours. Can they track that on the KUB app?
We don't surface that just yet. It's a good question. What we do, we stay in contact with them, though, specifically, because the minute they go down, and I know it's kind of ironic that we'd send them an email or a text when their internet's down, but at least we can still communicate with them that way. But an ETR on those, we've not even entered that space just yet, but that's definitely a future state of where we want to communicate with them. I think we'll be better than most in being able to be transparent about where we stand with that. But great question. Great question.
And great job on the numbers. I mean, it's definitely catching on.
Yeah, we're very pleased and hope that's just an upward trend. But that does conclude my presentation. If you all have any other questions, all right.
We'll wrap up with a couple of things real quick here. We were notified last month that we had won a Governor's Environmental Stewardship Award. That is given by TDEC. It's a big event in Nashville, and we were given the award due to our community solar project. And the purpose of this award is for those to recognize folks who go above and beyond the rules and regulations of the environmental stewardship. And so our community solar obviously is one of those things. We were one of 8 agencies in the state to win an award out of 80 nominations, so a big deal for us. And we're the first utility ever to get it 3 times. So this is our 3rd time getting a governor's award. Chastity and Bill and I went out to Nashville to accept that award, and they spoke really highly of our community solar and how it's a trendsetter. You know, we're fully subscribed, so it's full. Good problem to have, which is what we're looking at. So obviously, it's a big honor to get that, and really proud of our folks in environmental stewardship who helped make this happen. So excellent award we got from the governor's office. And then I want to recognize a couple of employees. We had never done this before at KUB's board that I know of, but I thought this was unique. So this past year, we started a new employee recognition program where we have a luncheon for folks who hit certain anniversaries, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. No, every 5 increment anniversary, we do a lunch for that group. And I looked at the list and realized we had 2 folks that had 50-plus years of service at KUB. So they came here in the 1970s, early 70s. And so I thought, well, let's make a big deal of that here at the board. So I'm going to embarrass a couple folks really quick here. First up is Brenda Wright. Brenda's been here since 1973. She's not here today, unfortunately, because we had to move the board meeting, so she's not going to be here, so I get to embarrass her on video. And so she's been here since 73, started as a key punch operator. Back in the day, when I came to KUB 30 years ago, she helped me set up my first phone number and fax and all that stuff, which back then was a big deal. Voicemail, that was all new stuff. And she was instrumental in getting me set up for that very first day. And she's been in our IT department ever since. She's done a lot of different roles. She now works in our corporate network and cybersecurity area. And she's just a wonderful person to be around. And I don't know if she's ever going to retire or not, but she's as happy as can be. And I'm happy to have her as part of our company. So great. Thank you, Brenda Wright, for your 51 years of service at KUB. And then Ray Cochran, he's in our electric systems engineering group. He's been here 50 years as of last month. Hired in 1974 as a draftsman at Fulton High School. Fulton had a very big program on getting folks to be part of our program. We had a lot of folks come out of that program and worked there for many, many years. Has been electrical engineering his whole career, basically. For 50 years, he's helped design many poles, many substations. Some of them are, I guess, replacing now since they're so old. I'm just kidding. Refurbishing, how to get it. And if you look at that picture in the upper right, that's me with him in his office 24 years ago, not as in year 2000. He is not happy with me, whatever I've said at that moment, but we've worked together that long. Yes, we were a lot younger, a lot darker hair, a lot more hair, and a lot skinnier back then. But he has been instrumental to me. I worked with him my first days at KUB, taught me a lot about the electric system and how it works and how to design it. And I can't say enough about Ray. And he's also been a huge part of our volunteer efforts. We have a group of folks called KUB Cares, and Ray's been a member of that, I guess, since it began, and really helps give back. You can see the things he goes, and we do the toy collection and for the angel trees, instrumental in that. So it just speaks to our folks and our longevity and what they give back to the community. It speaks so much to how much we are fortunate, but also part of our culture is just that we want you here for as long as you want, and hope you're here for a long time. And those two folks, Brenda and Ray, mean a lot to me. Ray's here today, so recognize Ray Cochran at 50 years of service. So he's trying to hang in for he's number 2 in employee length. He wants to get to number 1, he says. So he's hoping Brenda retires soon. So. Yeah, but thank you, Ray, so much. And thank you, Brenda, if you're watching. I appreciate you a whole lot also. I'll finish up with that and let it back to the chair. Thank you, Adrian.
Well, thank you for recognizing them. That is a major accomplishment. Thank you for your service. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board today? Saying now, we will have, following the adjournment of this meeting, the board will have a lunch session that is open for the public to observe. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.